someone were to ask you, what is the most underrated staff for sorceries in the entire game, you'd probably answer with something sane. You'd go with like a meteorite staff or a demi-human queen or a crystal staff or some weird shit like that. You would never, in a million years, answer the staff of the guilty. Because you'd have no idea what the fuck the staff of the guilty is, because this is a 2% drop staff. FromSoft, why do you keep doing this? But anyway, this is the unique staff for thorn sorceries. It has a boost to damage for those, and it scales entirely off of faith. It's not an even split like it is with the Prince of Death staff or the Magma staff. It is purely and entirely a faith-based staff. And at first you think that wouldn't work, but I'm going to run you through how it works and why it's such an effective staff to have. These are the spells that you get access to at 15 and 18 int. I figured those were two pretty good breakpoints to look at because in practical terms that's probably where you're going to be. Assuming we have 10 int as a baseline, you know, you're either starting at Wretch or something like a Confessor or a Priest and just investing a couple of points and then putting on the Stargazer Heirloom. And then 18 int is if you're really pushing it and putting on Queen Renala's Banana Hat as well. As you can see, we've actually got a decent variety here. The real standout winners here are Swift Shard, Slicer, Glintstone Stars, Fear's Mist, Glintblade, and maybe the Arc. And that's all at 15 int. You actually get a pretty decent selection of the basic spells by doing that. Swift Shard is pretty much the best spell in the game, and it's single-handedly why you would want to take this staff as a faith build, I think. You don't really need to go up to 18 int. Most of the stuff here isn't useful. Rank or Call is okay, but you have to remember this isn't the upgraded version, it's just the normal one. It's kind of difficult to land it. Same deal with Glintstone Stars, it's only firing 3 of them. But, you know, you've got something to work with here. Night Maiden's Mist is a pretty big winner if you're doing invasions as well. It's really useful to just seal off a room. Glintblade is also useful to just sit up and then lead into hits or combos and stuff. The big thing I want to point out here is that Faith doesn't have an equivalent to Swift Shard. It doesn't really have an equivalent to Glintblade, at least not for low cost, and it doesn't really have anything as effective as Night Maiden's Mist. Carrion Slicer you can afford to miss out on because you have Catch Flame and Bestial Sling. You don't have a projectile as good as Swift Shard in incantations. You simply don't have anything that fast and that long range. That's really why you want this staff. I can't stress it enough. It's so liberating to be able to just toss these out willy-nilly on your faith build. Now, the obvious question to ask then is, why do I want to be on a faith build? Well, if you're on an int build, you have a large selection of different spells obviously, but you miss out on some buffs that faith builds have access to, including a couple of big game changers like Barrier of Gold, Erd Tree Protection, and then a couple of the healing spells can be really good if you spec into that. And you don't want to be on an int faith build because int faith fucking sucks. If you're playing as an int faith build, you only have access to one weapon, or else you have to accept that your damage is terrible. If you're playing as a normal faith build, you have the whole selection of weapons available to you. You don't have to deal with that Sword of Night and Flame bullshit. Another thing to keep in mind is that incantations have some big, heavy-hitting stuff on the high end of the faith. Giant's Flame Take V is a really good spell. I know sorcery builds have Cannon of Hyena, but it's not quite as good as Giant's Flame Take V. It's a little slower, the damage isn't as exceptional. Additionally, these big incantations are going to come in really handy if you want to combo off of Briars of Sin. That's right, we're talking about the Thorn Sorcery in the video about the Thorn Sorcery staff. What a shocker! Briars of Punishment is absolutely awful, unusable. It's too slow, it doesn't track very well, and even when it does land, the damage isn't that great. I could only land this on fat rolling hosts, and it would only deal about 400 damage. Briars of Sin is where things start to get spicy. It's definitely not a dueling spell. Any opponent with a brain cell can just not go anywhere near this spell. But what it is it's a really good invasion tool, because it's just got a shit ton of hyper armor on it, and you can combo it into other incantations. First hit stuns them, the second hit is pretty much guaranteed afterwards, and then you don't do the third hit of the spell, you actually cancel it into an incantation. Because for whatever reason, they have a really generous window on this spell to cancel it into a different spell. I assume it's there so that the multicast can work, but it's really useful for us to abuse here. There's a couple of different spells you can choose to go with. The Dragon Breaths are a good choice. You can also go with something like Lanciax's Glaive, I think I used at the start. The first Sin Thorn into Placidus Axe is a true combo. Wrath of Gold, Grail's Roar, any big AoE will also do really well. Flame of Frenzy, hell, you can even just get really fucking fancy and throw in any of the Crucible spells if you want to. Once people have been hit by that second hit of Briars of Sin, it's really just up to you how hard you want to cook. You're pretty much going to have an easy time killing them at that point, because they'll already have taken like 800 damage. They're going to be rolling backwards 90% of the time, and they're going to get caught by whatever bullshit you throw out next. It is a lot of fun, and honestly, not as bad as I was expecting. It's still not great, don't get me wrong. If your opponent is smart, this will not work on them. But fortunately for us, most of the Elden Ring player base is not smart, so you can do it anyway. There's also a couple of other downsides that aren't too obvious. Firstly, the self-damage. It doesn't look like a lot, but you're also dealing self-bleed with each of those hits. So if someone is wailing on you with a bleed weapon, you're actually pretty likely to proc it on yourself and just blitz out a bazillion damage from their weapon, the bleed proc, and the self-damage you're doing to yourself. The other big problem this spell has is that it's purely magic damage. It doesn't look like magic damage. It looks like it should be a pure physical spell, but nope. This is magic damage. So if someone is using Barrier of Gold or Magic Fortification or just eating a liver or something, which they're highly likely to do because they can see that you're holding a staff, and that's the correct response to seeing someone holding a staff, you're not going to be able to cook anymore. You're only going to hit them for like 300, 600 damage if you're lucky, and they're not going to feel as panicked, they're not going to be pressured into rolling away as easily, and it's going to severely hurt your chances of just instantly obliterating them. You have to be aware of that. If you see them bring out the buffs, just put the staff away. You're using a faith build, you don't need the staff. That's kind of what I really like about this. You get to play a sort of a soft int build, but you don't get instantly fucked if someone puts on buffs. And you don't have to play as an awful Sword of Night and Flame, Soy Jack, whatever the hell the kids are calling it nowadays. You're just free to do your thing with a normalized faith build. Faith builds are by no means weak, you get some decent damage, and you can just go to town even without the thorns. I found that most of the time I was using this staff, I didn't even land Briars of Sin at any point. I was just playing normally like I was a sorcerer who had access to fireballs and dragons and shit. It's honestly not that bad. Is it the best staff in the game? No. Really not. The best staff is like Renala's staff. Or maybe the Olbenuric staff if you've got like some junked up arcane build attached to it. What this staff does do very well is it just doesn't ask a lot of you. It's not like the staff of the Prince of Death where it just asks you to completely shit your whole build, and it's not like a pure int staff where it asks you to just trust that you're not going to run into any buffs. This is a staff that you can pretty easily throw on and take off at a moment's notice, and that's what I really like about it. And that's why I'm saying This is the most underrated staff, because literally any faith build could put this on if they wanted to, and yet they're not. I have never seen this staff in all my hours in the game. What is up with that? If you are watching this video and you have a save file at home with a faith build on it, you could be using this staff right now. It's a little difficult to farm for, it's preferable to get it dropped, but if you are farming it, I would recommend going to the fort near the magma worm in Volcano Manor. That's where I got mine. There's a bunch of those thorn sorcery enemies wandering around. There's also a couple of places you can farm it in the mountaintops of the giants, but that's a little more iffy because you have to deal with shit like the fire prelate. But I'm getting off course. That's all I have to say. This stuff is good. You should try it. I have few more clips, but I think I've really proved my point already, so maybe if there's some new discoveries about this stuff, I'll make a second video, but I don't think that's likely. Sorry about the audio, I'm not recording on my headset right now because the microphone isn't working, so you can hear some of my mouse clicks and stuff. You might be able to hear some rummaging in the background. But yeah, that's all I got for today. Peace, I'll see you later or something.